Three men corner a woman in a quiet cafe. Smirks, demands. A hand grabs her wrist, then the room flips. She's not prey. She's Lieutenant Amelia Rhodes, U.S. Navy. What happens next will change a city. Three men corner a woman in a quiet cafe. Smirks, demands. A hand grabs her wrist, then the room flips. She's not prey. She's Lieutenant Amelia Rhodes, U.S. Navy. What happens next will change a city. Part 1. The Broken Watch. The cafe smelled like orange peel and burnt sugar. Cups clinked. Steam sighed. People typed and pretended not to notice other lives. Amelia sat by the window with a chipped mug and a broken watch. The watch had stopped long ago at 14:07. She wore it anyway. She liked the weight of it, the quiet warning on her skin that time is not what we think it is. Her wallet lay open beside her, thin, almost empty. A folded bus ticket poked out like a tongue. She smiled at that. Truth had a habit of showing itself. Outside, a dusty road cut past the cafe and down to the port. Trucks used it mostly. Old tires, new lies. The dust came in when the door opened. It stayed. She watched the door. The bell chimed and three men came in laughing. One with bleached hair and a sunburned neck. One with broad shoulders and ink on his forearms. One with a narrow face and restless fingers. They carried the kind of laughter that needed an audience. They scanned the room, found her table, and wandered over like they owned gravity. They did not ask. They did not earn. They simply stood there and leaned into her daylight. "You need a smaller table," the blonde said. His voice scraped the words as if he'd been practicing cruelty on cheap furniture. "We're four." "You're three," Amelia said. "Plus our moods," he said and laughed. The narrow one laughed a second late, like he needed permission. They pulled out chairs without waiting. The broad one reached for her mug, swirled the coffee, then set it back as if he'd done her a favor. The narrow one tapped her laptop with 2 fingers. Tap, tap, tap. He made the sound mean something. She closed the laptop. Calm hands. Balanced breath. The watch on her wrist was cold metal and old memory. 14:07. A tide turned at that minute once. A boat pivoted. A life split. She could hear the gulls if she let herself. "Move," the blonde said. "We're bigger." "The table isn't measuring your body," she said. "It's measuring your manners." A few heads lifted. The owner, Mrs. Chen, watched from behind the pastry case with a face like a thin sheet of paper, light showing through but strong at the crease. Customers stilled. The room gathered. The broad man leaned in. Ink along his arm was the kind sailors got when they weren't sailors. A compass rose that would never find north. A chain pretending to be anchor. He nodded at Amelia's empty wallet. "You camping here for the Wi-Fi?" "Waiting," Amelia said. "For who?" "For sense," she said. The narrow one smirked. "She's funny." The blonde pushed his chair closer. He wanted scrape marks on the floor. He liked marks. He liked proof he'd been somewhere. "Tell us your name." "Tell me yours," she said. The blonde's eyes went pale, then flat. The room felt smaller. Dust hung visible in the sun stripe like punctuation that hadn't decided where to land. Amelia felt the watch wait again. It wasn't about time. It was about habit. How to sit. How to stand. How to speak. How not to shake. She angled her chair slightly. Now she could see the door and the reflection on the espresso machine. Now she could see Mrs. Chen's hand near the phone. Now she could see the broad one's hip. No knife. Keys. The narrow one had a twitch that suggested he had once run and been caught. The blonde had that posture of boys who learned that shouting worked. "Move," he said again. "Or we move you." "You want the table?" Amelia said softly. "Take the table, but you'll keep my space." The broad one laughed. "Your space is the whole table." "No," she said. "My space is me." The narrow one reached again. He touched the broken watch, just a brush of the knuckle, like he wanted to see what she'd do. She did nothing. Her face had that slight grief she carried like a matchbook. There was a name scratched inside it. She hadn't looked in years. "You can't even afford a watch that works," the broad one said. Amelia looked at her empty wallet. "Sometimes broken things tell true time," she said. The blonde rolled his wrist. "Here's my time." He tilted his head toward the door. "You've got 5 seconds. 5 for what?" she asked. "For learning," he said. She lifted her mug and found the coffee had gone bitter. Sun moved across the window and settled on the dusty road like a warning sign with the letters peeled off. In the glass she saw the blonde's hand open and close. A grasp rehearsed. His friends were actors who didn't know the script. He did. He had always done this in rooms that felt privately owned. He had never learned how it ends when the room has eyes. Mrs. Chen stepped out from behind the counter with a pot of hot water and her small, brave chin. "Refill?" she asked the blonde, her voice a bridge. He smirked and waved her away. Grown-ups are talking. The room tightened. Someone's chair squeaked. Someone's phone lit up without being touched. The blonde placed his palm on the table and leaned. The broad man mirrored him. The narrow one slid a foot under the table like he wanted to hook her chair and jerk. Amelia put her hands flat. One on the mug, one on the watch. She felt the tiny nick on the watch glass. She remembered the wave that had thrown her into a wall of water and then handed her back like a compromise. She remembered the instructor's voice. "A quiet room is a map. Read it, then redraw it," she smiled. It wasn't pleasant. It was kind. "Here's your 5th second," the blonde whispered. His hand shot for her wrist. He shouldn't have. And then the doorbell chimed again and a shadow fell over the table. The shadow belonged to Mr. Chen, who had come from the kitchen with a tray of plates. He saw the grip. He saw the distance vanish between a stranger's hand and a woman's pulse. His mouth opened, closed. The plates didn't rattle. He had taught his hands better than that. The blonde's fingers touched Amelia's skin. The bone of his thumb rested on the metal of her watch. The room inhaled and forgot how to let go. Amelia moved. Not fast the way movies are fast. Fast the way dawn is fast when you blink and night vanishes. Fast like a decision you made 10 years ago and only now notice. She rotated her forearm and stepped into the motion. The blonde's wrist folded, then his weight followed. His cheek kissed wood. His breath made the sugar packets tremble. The broad one swore and stood. The narrow one froze with his mouth crooked open on some word that had never been said in time. Amelia's voice was soft. She spoke in measurements. "Your shoulder is safe if you don't thrash," she said to the blonde. "Your wrist is not," the broad one reached. He saw her eyes. He stopped. The tattoo on his forearm was badly inked. The compass rose bled at the edges. It would never point anywhere but inward. "Let him up," he said. "After you step back," she said. He moved back 1 pace. It was reluctant but real. The narrow one's foot caught the chair he had planned to hook. His whole plan fell in 2 seconds and he looked small in the rubble. "Okay," he said. Okay. Now your friend tells me his name," Amelia said. The blonde whispered into the tabletop. "Rick, your last name Rick," she said. "Why?" He said into wood. "Because names are a kind of apology," she said. "And you owe me the smallest one," he told her. The broad man told her his too without being asked, as if he was trained to recite it. The narrow one tried a fake one and then corrected himself because even lies need courage and he didn't have any today. Mrs. Chen was closer now. "Not too close. You learn distance when you own a place." She looked at Amelia with the eyes of someone who measures flour and risk the same way. "Do you need me to call?" she began. "I'm fine," Amelia said. The blonde moved his knee a fraction. She pressed his wrist a fraction more and he reconsidered the value of fractions. "Stand," she said. Slow, he did. The cafe remembered sound. Somebody let out a breath with a laugh on it. A small lightning release that skittered under the tables. The broad man touched the back of his own neck like it hurt him just watching. "What are you?" the narrow one said, trying to make it a joke and failing. "Security? Bouncer? Customer," she said. The blonde rubbed his wrist. His smirk had fallen somewhere under the table. He couldn't find it. "You think you're tough?" "No," she said. "I think you were careless." She pulled a card from the wallet. It was the only card that mattered in there, and even it wasn't the point. She set it on the table with 2 fingers. The card didn't shine. It didn't need to. The eagle and anchor sat quiet and certain on plastic. So did the line, Lieutenant Amelia Rhodes. United States Navy. The cafe did a new thing then. It assembled itself around the truth. Shapes shifted. Whispers changed color. The broad man saw the anchor and didn't know where to put his hands. The narrow one looked for the door without moving his head. The blonde's mouth opened and shut like a fish stranded in his own story. "You targeted a stranger," Amelia said. "You miscounted," the blonde laughed. It was a small sound that didn't belong to him. "So what, you gonna arrest us?" "No," she said. "I'm on leave. I'm having coffee." And breaking wrists, the broad one muttered. Merely bending, she said. Mrs. Chen glanced at the card. Her eyes softened, then sharpened at the edges. Sir, she said to the blonde, you can leave now. Or what, he said. But his voice cracked at the end because the question had been fully answered. They huddled near the door like boys outside a principal's office. Amelia watched them go. The bell chimed. Dust rose. The sunlight made a thin blade across the floor where the door had been. It cut the room into what came before and what comes after. She put the card away, picked up her mug. The coffee had cooled into something she couldn't finish, so she didn't. She opened the laptop, but words weren't going to show up for her on a screen today. The watch face flashed in her mind, 14:07. The minute that sat on her wrist like a stone in a pocket, Mr. Chen brought a fresh cup. On the house. Amelia started to protest. He shook his head. We appreciate calm, he said. We appreciate you. Calm is cheaper than broken furniture, she said, and he laughed. Students drifted over to say they had never seen anything like that. The elderly couple by the plant nodded as though they had and were relieved to see it again. A girl asked where she learned it. Work, Amelia said. Someone asked if the men would come back. I hope not, Amelia said. Hope wasn't a soft word in her mouth. It had bones. She slipped the watch band to the next hole because the leather had stretched. She felt the old scuff against her wrist bone and remembered a day on a deck when the sun made a field of knives and her brother had laughed at the glare. The blonde's face floated back. Not the smirk. The second face. The one after surprise. There had been a tattoo along the webbing between his thumb and forefinger. Small. A symbol half hidden by veins. She had seen it before in an evidence photo and in a briefing made of gray paper and patience. Port crews linked to pilfered cargo. Crates that arrived light. Containers that left heavy. The symbol was a seed brand once. Now it meant something else. It had been reused by men who did not plant anything. She took a napkin and drew it. 3 lines intersecting at an angle that felt like a crooked crosshair. She stared at the napkin until the ink bled. Her phone lit and buzzed against the wood. Unknown number. One text, we see you, Lieutenant. She looked up, and in the reflection of the espresso machine's chrome, she saw the 3 men at the window, not coming in, just standing in the glow like moths pretending to be stars. Then a second text came through, and it was worse because it knew something it shouldn't. 7. The second watch lay where a stranger's hand would put it, centered, neat, wrong, same scratched glass. Same cheap band, but this one ticked. 14:08, tick, tick, then silence, as if a minute had been loaned and called back. She didn't touch it at first. She listened. Fridge hum. Pipes talking. The city's small throat clearing. No other breath. She moved through rooms the way you move through memory. Slow. Certain. 2 books were shifted a finger's width. A window latch kissed open then shut. The coffee cup had a new circle underneath, faint, sticky. Whoever came in had been careful. Careless people leave scents. Careful people leave geometry. Amelia put the empty wallet on the table beside the new watch. She looked at both. One promised nothing. One promised a minute. She lifted the watch with a dish towel. Turned the band. There, under the tongue of leather, a shallow stamp, 14B08. Not a time. A map, Pier 14, Berth 08. She smiled without joy. She slipped the towel in her bag. She opened her own watch. The broken one. The face still at 14:07. The screw head at the back had a tiny bite mark. Once, long ago, she'd opened it to clean salt out after a storm. She could still feel her brother's laugh in that motion. She closed it. She let its dead weight settle. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown again. Did you like the gift? She typed nothing. She stared at the letters until they meant less than dust. Another text. Come at dusk, bring your badge, leave your friends. She didn't have any friends nearby. That was the point. Leave your friends. As if she hadn't already. She wiped the new watch prints off the table with the wet edge of one of Mrs. Chen's napkins she'd pocketed without thinking. The napkin had the little red star stamp from the pastry bags. She saw her own handwriting on its back from earlier. The crooked crosshair symbol. The ink had bled and made a small bruise of lines. She sank the ticking watch into a glass of water and watched a bubble rise. Then a second. Then nothing. It might be a mic, or it might be theater. Either way, it didn't need air. She packed light. The wallet. 2 coins. The bus ticket. The broken watch on her wrist and the weight of a name that had stretched her spine for years. When she opened the door, the stairwell light flickered once. Footsteps above paused, then kept going. She took the stairs. On the second landing, a man leaned against the peeling paint, phone to his ear, saying nothing. He watched her pass, eyes level. She saw the seed symbol inked thin along his knuckle. He smiled like a lock testing a key. "Dusk," he said, and cupped the phone. She kept walking, and the dusty road outside lifted its small throat of grit as if to say, "Hurry, or don't. Either way, we will keep the score." At the curb, a van idled with its lights off. The side door slid. Inside, between shadows, she saw the jawline that used to give orders. Not Rick, not his broad friend. Someone else. A face from a briefing where the paper was gray. Keller. Her phone buzzed again. A single word. "Run," she looked up. The message wasn't from her friend. It was from Mrs. Chen, and behind her on the stairwell, a shoe scraped once like a match, and the van door began to close on her minute. She didn't run. Running tells a hunter he's hunting. She stepped back into the only church she trusted, a plain hallway with bad acoustics and no exits that lied. The van door thunked shut. Tires whispered. The engine faded. Upstairs, the match-shoed man waited for her to flinch. She didn't, she climbed. He smiled again. "Dusk," he said, like a password he planned to make into a trap. "I prefer daylight," she said, and the sentence moved before he did. His hand came out of his jacket quick and empty. He wanted a flinch. She gave him a wall. Her palm met his wrist and rolled his certainty into vertical. He rocked on the edge of the step and chose not to fall. "Smart. You don't have to do their errands," she said. "There's nothing at the end." "Payday," he said. "Funeral day," she said. He looked past her, down the stairwell. Maybe it's something he had left on the dusty road of his own life. He moved aside and let her pass. Not mercy, math. She walked. The road met her with grit and old rubber. The port cranes were ribs blacked against a dying sky. Dusk came anyway. Time does not check your schedule. She took buses that didn't line up and alleys that did, and she arrived above Pier 14 as the lamps blinked into their strange yellow. Berth 08 yawned open like a missing tooth. The symbol chalked on a bollard pointed nowhere helpful. She watched the patterns. Forklifts like tired beetles, men in reflective vests who had stopped reflecting years ago, a boat's horn with a hangover. The van appeared far side and made a show of not being careful. It parked where cameras could see it, so the cameras would look at it. Good theater hides the trap in the cheap seats. She moved along a shadow seam and stepped onto the berth. The boards complained and then accepted her. The broken watch was cold. The empty wallet knocked lightly in her pocket like a reminder of small debts. Container stacks rose like exhausted cities. She found 14B08 without looking at numbers. The air around it held a warmth that shouldn't have been there. Machines had breathed here. Or people. The lock was closed but bored. Old Salt had chewed one hinge down to thin patience. She slid a coin under it, levered gently, and the metal agreed. One quiet release. One old prayer. Inside, the light was the kind you make with a stubborn flashlight and a bad plan. Wooden crates labeled Crown Seed. Not seed, not crown. The brand stolen from old sacks to be repainted on newer sins. She pried the lid on one. Metal cases inside. Foam cutouts, radios, secure units. Not ours anymore. Stolen from somewhere the carpet was new and the budget wasn't. Footsteps, 2 pairs. One light, one heavy. She slid behind the door, watched the shadow enter, counted breaths. Rick stepped into the beam and held it in his teeth. The light trembled on the cases. The broad one followed, cursing. Boss wants the pretty ones to front. Cameras need good faces. Rick laughed and it didn't fit. She'll come. They always want the minute you took. The broad one touched a case. Heavy, worth it? More than your arm, Rick said. Amelia stepped out of the hinge shadow and laid a hand on the broad one's forearm. He froze. His skin was hot. Worth your life? She asked. Rick spun. The light fell. It rolled under cases and made new shapes. He grinned. No smirk left. Dusk, he said, as if he had invented the idea. Amelia nodded at the door. Tell Keller to bring his camera. Rick whistled. 2 notes. The kind men use when they want to borrow violence. You're outnumbered, the broad one said. No, she said. I'm out-talked. For now. Outside, Boots answered Rick's little song. More than 2 men. More than 3. She took the empty wallet out and set it on the nearest crate. It looked like a laugh that had dried up. Rick stared at it, confused. You'll want that, she said. It holds the only thing you can't buy back. He reached. He found nothing. He shrugged. What? Time, she said. And the container door shuddered as another hand grabbed it from outside. Then a siren started somewhere impossible close, and blue washed over the berth like a new tide. The siren wasn't police. The port's own alarm howled as if a crane had gone rogue. Workers scattered. Lamps flashed. Cameras turned their blind eyes toward the wrong spectacle exactly as planned. For someone else. Keller's voice came in like a knife through fabric. Smooth. The kind that cuts without warning. Lieutenant Rhodes, he said, standing in the doorway with his hands behind his back as if he were inspecting a kitchen.